introduce our second speaker, Mojirayo Oluwatoyin Ogunlana. I hope I'm saying it right, Moji. She's a digital rights on a mission to establish a legal framework at national and international levels that safeguards a free and open internet while upholding human rights. She champions strategic litigation in courts to challenge constraints on freedom of expression, association, and assembly. She has very extensive experience with more than 12 years of legal practice experience litigating on various issues, particularly on internet shutdowns. So, Moji, we are really excited to listen to your experiences litigating on ECOWAS, in Togo, and in many other places. She has been also, because of her work, she has earned distinction and recognition from Columbia University Global Freedom of Expression, which I follow, by the way, for the audience. The Columbia University Freedom of Expression, they have a specific dedicated website that tracks cases globally. So it's wonderful, Moji, that you have been recognized by the Columbia University. So it's a distinct honor to have you here. Moji also serves as a principal partner of MON legal firm based in Abuja, Nigeria, and the founder of DiGiCiViC initiative, an governmental organization. She has also done not only on internet shutdowns, but on gender rights. I see that, the full bio, you can see it, of course. But it's an absolute honor, Moji, to have you here. And I will give you a chance to speak on the journey through landmark court cases, Amnesty International, Togo, Guinea, Conakry case, and the Twitter case. So without further ado, Moji, I will give the floor to you, and we are excited to have you on this forum.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nbe. I think I don't know if I pronounced your name well, but of course.
You said it perfectly, Moji. You said it perfectly.
Okay, so I think, my name is Mojirayo Ogunlana. I think it's better that way, because if you go to the Oluwatoyin, it's a mouthful. So I think it's a wonderful thing that you extended your invitation to me to come here to speak today. I do not take your invitation for granted. And I thank the president of the ISOC Ethiopia. I happen to be the co-chair on digital rights for the ISOC Nigeria. And so I've been able to use my skills, because ISOC is practically something that it's something of service. So I use my skill at ISOC. Now, thank you, Mr. Brian, Brian, because you set the stage for a proper discussion on internet shutdown. And I love the fact that you entered a kind of trap that I like, that trap of, oh yes, I absolutely believe that the internet should be regulated. Yeah. Okay, so I want to start from there before I go through my experiences in the court. So I believe that the concepts of regulation itself, in a democratic society is very complex. And I think that is why when we go to the Internet Governance Forum, for instance, we have to discuss the issue of regulation from the perspective of multi-stakeholder engagements. And it's because we have understood that there is a complexity, especially if the society we have in the individual society of the world, we are looking at what kind of structure of governance is in play in that particular society. So for me, maybe because of my world view or from the view of a democratic society, I find regulation of the internet, I found it to be a little bit tricky. And I'll say why. It's tricky if we have a political structure that does not even understand, especially in Africa, and let me speak for West Africa. Political structure that does not even understand the concept of democracy. We do not, I think that is one thing that has bedeviled us as Africans. We do not even understand that concept of democracy, or our understanding of democracy is I think is faulty, because when we look at democracy, we still want to do democracy in the way that we do our African the traditional setting of leadership. And so we miss it. We miss it totally. I know for instance, in a lot of African settings, when your elders are speaking, the younger ones keep quiet. And when a younger one wants to express their view, you shut the younger ones down and say, oh, no. You're too young to be having this kind of discussion. We are older. You don't know, you've not had our kind of experience. So I think leaders in Africa has brought that kind of ideals and idea into play when they have the opportunity to rule a country, for instance. And so that is what has bedeviled a country like Togo for a long time. We have a country, beautiful set of people, but restricted set of people. There are people who cannot wake up tomorrow morning and decide to do a protest without getting into a lot of problems with the authorities, or them being identified and imprisoned. And that, interestingly, had also, crossed over into, how do I put it, expression. So one thing that I do as a digital rights lawyer is I litigate on the rights that are really controlled under the civic space. And that is the freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and freedom of association. And so when if we put this case of Togo into perspective, for instance, you look at a country where there was the political unrest and people were really, on the streets protesting that, no, this is not it. You can't change our constitution. It was an issue of a president having a legislature or the legislative arm practically doing the biddings of the executive arm. So now, when that happens, it becomes a big problem for the people, because it means that their representatives can no longer represent the interest of the people. So if that is happening, how else can the people voice out their opinions? How else can they let the government know that these policies of the executive is affecting us as a people? And now it's funny because I can draw the parallel with the Nigerian society at this moment in history. The president controls practically the National Assembly, the legislative arm of Nigeria. And so there is nothing the president wants now that the legislative arm is not making happen, even if it is against the desires of the people. So that's why I said there is an issue with the way we look at democracy, And so because democracy talks about representative government, it affects a lot of things. I don't know if it happens in Ethiopia. Is there a possibility under your constitution for people to go into a referendum? This is not available for me as a Nigerian. There is nothing like that. My constitution doesn't give the opportunity for referendum. Meaning, I have to depend on whoever the political figure that was chosen to represent me. They may say it was an election, but it was a chosen process that is now representing me at the National Assembly. So I'm now using that as a parallel to the situation of Togo, where people now feel that, whatever we express is not even going to be getting to the president. So let us protest and say, no, you can't change the constitution from 4 years single term to 5 years, and then 4 years, 2 terms, and then to 5 years single term. You can't change it now. And then trying to elongate the stay of the president. So based on that political unrest, people were tweeting about it. People were all over the online space and all that. The minister in the cabinet of the president comes up one morning and say, we are going to shut down the internet because we want to protect the interest of Togo. We want to protect our national security. And then they went ahead and then shut down this internet. And they didn't do it once, they did it, twice at different times. And yes, so when they did that, the problem that I think they didn't put into factor or they weren't really thinking about. And I will speak on that before I go into the legal aspect. The internet has become a very, how do I put it, has become a second environment for us as human beings. So now as a human being, I know that I have a physical environment. And secondly, I know that I have an online environment. Now, just as I believe that I have a right to life, to live life, live well-being, health, physical, mental health in this physical environment, I believe that I have the same rights in the online environment, which is now the internet. Now, the internet environment has become more or less a place of survival for some people. It is the only place that they have felt like they could express themselves. It's the only place that they have felt that they can be themselves or be human. We cannot take that away. And then apart from that, we have businesses that rely completely on the internet, that they would not function if the internet does not exist. These businesses, we have had individuals making money from sales, trading. We have even the economy of Nigeria today. If it shuts down the internet, it's going to suffer. Or the economy of Ethiopia is going to suffer largely because there is a kind of income, there is a kind of finance that is coming through transactions happening over the internet space. So that is why one of the things that we need to get clear is that the internet has become more or less a right, has become more or less an ingrained environment that if you, for any reason, cut us out from the internet, it means that you're breaching our right to life. That is my opinion. That is what I've held on to. The courts have not seen it from that aspect, and I'm willing to canvass it in the courts very, very soon. But generally, when they talk about internet and internet shutdown, the main rights that come up to the fore is the right to freedom of expression, right to assembly, and right to association. And in this case, when you're talking about freedom of expression, I don't know, I've not had the opportunity to look at the Ethiopian constitution, but if I go through the International Covenant on Civic and Political Rights, that's the ICCPR, which of course a lot of countries all over the world have signed on to and have even ratified. And if you look at the provision that has to do with the freedom of expression, Article 19, you will see that when you're talking of freedom of expression, you are talking of several aspects of expression. First, you're talking about speech, you're talking about opinion. You're in that particular expression, there is still, conscience and thought and how do I put it? The media, there is the press, the right to information, to access information, and the right to disseminate information. So these are really out there playing on the internet space today. We have journalists who cannot practice their profession if they're not online. Yes, because they have been able to build the online audience and the online streams of income that they couldn't do in the physical space. So these are people who are dependent on the internet. And so part of, apart from having Amnesty International, we had some organizations and then journalists who felt that their rights to the internet was, how do I put it, their right to freedom of expression had been breached. And their rights, and in some aspects, right to assemble and to associate over the internet space. And then we brought before the honorable courts 3 cogent tests that must never be, how do I put, there's a big word that's through in my head, but I don't want to use that. You cannot for any reason undermine these 3 tests. And they are contained in Article 19.3. And the 3 tests is simple. Now, if you want to restrict a right like the freedom of expression, you must first ask yourself as a government, is there a law in place that gives me the right to restrict this particular freedom of expression? And so when you have been able to settle that, you ask yourself, is there a law in place? Have I done a law specifically for this? Today, we know that the United Nations Human Rights Committee in 2016, also followed by the African Commission, on human and people's rights have all agreed, and there's a consensus that rights that existed offline are now existing online. And so there is no drama about it. All you have to do is go to your law books and look at the rights or the laws that were offline, and look at how they are applicable on the internet space. So a lot of people, when you were asking a question, for instance, where you say the legal system, there was one question. I had to take a picture of it because I knew I was going to ask this question. Let me quickly look through and get it out. Is there a law? I think it's about a law in place. Let me be sure. In each of the countries that allows for, yes. Do you think, no, not this one. Do you think the legal profession, Do you think the legal system in your country is well suited to handle internet shutdowns? That particular question, I love it, because the truth of the matter is that we all have a legal system in place. And in our legal systems, we have had, for instance, constitution in place. And not only constitution, we have some subsidiary legislations. We have our penal or criminal codes that will define what we do in our environment. All these laws, all these legislations are applicable today in the online space. So are we prepared to actually, if we said, for instance, follow Brian, we must regulate the internet? Are we prepared? Do we have things to work with? I totally believe that we do have things to work with, because even as I go to court to defend and try to enforce our right to freedom of expression, I also understand the aspects of online violence. And online violence is something that is really becoming a big issue. Yes, it is there. And how do we address them? We address them with the criminal, laws that are already in existence in our country. So, but I love the way the government of Togo came with it. They said, "Oh, there is no particular law in place, but we have a particular policy that was released by the ministry that gave us that, the right to shut down the internet." And then the court was of the opinion, and that was, because that was one. And I need to say this: these 3 tests, I've not completed the rest. These 3 tests are cumulative. Once you answer one, you need to go directly to the second one and resolve it. Once you resolve the second one, you go to the third one and resolve it. So you can't say you have resolved one and then, oh yeah, then we are good to go. We have a law in place, then let us shut down the internet. No. So the Amnesty International Togo case, the court restricted itself to the fact that the government of Togo did not have a law in place that gave it the right or let's just use the right to go ahead, or the justification, that's what, the justification to go ahead and shut down the internet. And so it was in that case that the court decided and said that, okay, there must be a law in place for you to decide to shut down the internet. You can't just say that you want to shut down the internet. And the court ended there, and with the one word that got a lot of, I think it was the court, Messenbet, that got the recognition from the Columbia University for being the significant ruling of 2018. And the court, the court was celebrated for that. The court said that, for instance, if you look at the freedom of expression, the internet space gives it the opportunity, gives us opportunity to express our freedom of expression. And if the freedom of expression is a right, it means that the internet is, or right to the internet, or right to access the internet, is a derivative right to the freedom of expression. So it means that the right to be on the internet is hinged on the right to freedom of expression, which was very laudable of the court at that time. The ECOWAS court has proven to be bold and courageous when it comes to holding up international human rights standards. And so, that aside, there was now a Twitter ban in Nigeria, which took place for 222 days. And when we went to court, we brought up, it was a bit tricky because we had different applicants before the court, and it wasn't possible for the court to actually look at my submission, for instance, which still brought up the 3-part test. And I thought I would still go to it. And the court just considered the major, okay, we did a consolidation of all parties. And so the first in time, as equity would say, the first in time had their brief adopted by the court, and that was SERAP. And so all the court did was it even appropriate for the Nigerian government to shut down the Twitter? And it came back to that issue that the government did not even have the power to, they didn't have anything in place that empowered it to shut down, Twitter. For instance, there is no regulation in place that could have given it that justification. But one thing I now appreciate about the ECOWAS court was when we brought the issue of the blogger, the Guinea Conakry case, and we took it directly to the court. And I saw that the court adopted our submissions for the first time, thinking about the other aspects of the test that, wasn't, well, they didn't have the opportunity to address, in the Amnesty International Togo case and the Twitter case. And the second test is this. So there is a law in place. Now, does this law pursue a legitimate aim, or your desire to shut down the internet? Is it done in pursuing a legitimate interest? What is the legitimate interest? Under the ICCPR and under the African Charter, I know, for instance, that the legitimate measures or legitimate ways of restricting the freedom of expression would be thinking about the public morality, public safety, public health, which are all exceptions to that right to freedom of expression. Because we understand that freedom of expression, assembly, and association are not absolute rights. And so they can be derogated in certain circumstances. And those are the safety issues, the health issues, and all. And when the government comes up, for instance, in the Togo case, oh yes, it's causing unrest, it's going to cause a lot of breakdown, there will be a lot of problems, national security is, the infrastructure of the state, country is going to be undermined. When they came up with all that, the courts didn't even go into address it, but the courts, just stated it that, oh yes, there are always legitimate reasons why government wants to shut down, government wants to restrict the right to freedom of expression. And so let's say, for instance, the court had resolved that there was a legitimate interest to be preserved, and that in this case, national security. There will now be a third arm of that question now, which every government should be able to answer, especially a democratic government. And that question is, the measure in which you have in addressing your legitimate interests, the measure that you know that you want to use in restricting the freedom of expression of the people, is it necessary in a democratic society? And when you're thinking about the necessity of that measure, you also have to think about, is it proportionate? The measure that you're using to address your legitimate interest, is it proportionate to the interest? Okay, so you cannot take a gun to a fist fight. That is generally known. It will not be proportionate. And so you will see, for instance, in criminal jurisprudence, criminal law jurisprudence, that if you are claiming self-defense, that somebody came to your house and the person knocks on your door and the person is holding out the hands and wants to punch you, and then you say the next thing you did was you carried a plank and you hit the person's face. The question that would be, before the court is the measure that you use. Is it proportionate? Is it proportionate? Was there a way you could have addressed it without causing eternal damage or something to another person? So are you saying that you saw somebody at the junction as a police officer, and then the person was trying to bring out their driver's license, and then you had shot the person, and then you come to the court and say, oh yeah, there was reasonable suspicion that he was about to bring out a gun. Oh, how do you come about that? So was it reasonable in this circumstance for you to have carried out that measure? And got another person's life taken. So this is just in the same way that is in interplay. If you want to shut down the internet, you must be able to show to the court that the measure that you're taking is proportionate. And that was what the ECOWAS court took, that step and adopted our submissions in the Guinea case, and said proportionality is very key to you shutting down the internet. So today, the consensus is this: whatever you want to do, in fact, there was a part of that judgment that really blew my mind, and I was really glad to know that it's even going to be rare, it's even going to be difficult for you to find a proportionate measure, or no, for you to say that the internet shutdown is a proportionate measure for whatever civil unrest they're having in your country. There is a protest. We thought that the shutting down of the internet is appropriate. No, it cannot be proportionate. Internet shutdown cannot be proportionate for addressing issues of national security. And I still hold on to that, and I totally agree with the court, and I totally agree with the jurisprudence that I'm seeing so far. And I think one of the countries that is really doing a progressive work when it comes to the right to the internet, even though it hasn't been recognized as a right to the internet, is the country of India. Their courts, you can feel it, you can sense it, that there is a genuine desire to do justice in most of the time. I can tell you, for instance, in Nigeria, that the judiciary has no idea of the complexity of having government having such a power to shut down the internet. So today, if they shut down the internet, I can tell you for free, that a court is going to hold that the government was justified because they were trying to protect the public safety, public morality, public health, and all that. And that's because most of these judges, so that goes back to the first question that you were saying, as the judiciary ready, most of our judges do not have an in-depth understanding of what digital rights are. They have this concept about the internet. Oh, yes, I'm using the internet. And when they say they are using the internet, it's just restricted to Google and WhatsApp, or maybe Telegram, or Instagram, or TikTok, or Twitter. That is what they're doing. They do not understand the issues like net neutrality. They do not understand all those issues. They do not understand things about access to the internet. They have no idea about what is throttling, what is disruptions, different concepts that, if you actually look at the Advocacy Assembly website, you will see different concept terms that has to do with internet shutdown. So what we as and interestingly, I was happy because the ECOWAS court has proven to be advanced and continue to be advanced when it comes to dealing with issues on digital rights, for instance. And that is what we should be replicating in our countries. We should be looking for ways to build the capacity of our judges, and not only our judges, even lawyers. Because right now, as an organization, DiGiCiViC initiative is taking on training of lawyers so that they can understand what digital rights is really. Because sincerely, if you're talking about digital rights, it's a broad concept. And when you're also talking about digital rights, you need to be able to break it down to the perspective that you feel that is relevant for your lawyers at a particular time, And so that's one of the things I'm doing, teaching and training and trying to build capacity so that people can be able to understand that, you cannot treat the internet the way you would, on another concept, I want to say you can't treat the internet the way you would treat your physical environment. But there was one question that I wanted to ask participants, maybe to reflect on or brainstorm on. And I said, do we shut down our societies every time there is protests? Whenever there is processions, rallies against government decisions, do we completely shut down the environment? Like we shut down the whole of Utopia and say, Utopia, everybody restricted to their houses. Nobody moves again because there is a protest going on or there is a civil. Or have we found ways of managing our society in a way that people can go out to access food, to access information, to access? So all these things are questions that we need to resolve when we're talking about shutting down the entirety of the internet. All because we say we want to address political unrest or whatever, or protest and all that. So it's a big issue. It's a big issue. In Nigeria, I approached the court because there was a telecommunications shutdown in a particular state for 30 days. That means nobody had access to their phones. You couldn't use your phone to make a call. You couldn't receive any call. And the reasons given was that the bandits, the terrorists, Boko Haram, they were also using the phone calls to reach out to their colleagues and to their groups and to be able to, gather together. One question that I had to ask, and I know, why submitting to the court was, please, I am curious. Do you think that these Boko Haram and these bandits that have access to some kind of gadgets, for instance, we have a lot of statistics and a lot of reporting that shows that they have access to a lot of gadgets, several gadgets. Are you saying they cannot afford to have a Turaya phone? A Turaya gives you access to the internet without your telecommunications, and they use satellite. And this is what they use. This is what they are aware of. Funny enough, you find the bandits have more, more weaponry and more arms than the government itself. It's a funny situation. So I brought that up as a submission, but the court wasn't really listening because they were so particular about the National Communications Commission has the right to shut down the internet. There's a regulation that said they can shut down telecommunications in the country, but in a state. But look at it from this perspective: a bandit walks into one home and decides to start shooting, and then in the next village, because we are all in the same state, and the next village, I can't even reach my neighbor, or I can't even reach that person. Say, bandits are everywhere. Please take cover. That is gone. Now, to access ambulance, I want to access the hospital. There is no way to make a phone call and say, oh, please, I need to get to this. Nothing. It means that you have made us a sitting duck. So should the bandits actually want to operate...
Moji, you have 2-3 minutes if you can conclude.
Okay. It means that they can just come into that particular state, shoot everybody, and everybody is dead. And then, of course, the international community, then other states of the country, they are not aware of anything that is happening. Why? Because you decided in your own wisdom that shutting down telecommunications was a measure that could address fighting bandits. So that is very, very disproportionate. I'm just trying to say that internet shutdowns can never be proportionate to addressing the legitimate aims such as national security. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Moji, for that very passionate presentation. We can see that you are very passionate about the issue as well, and hearing your experience of litigation was very wonderful. I think your idea of, really inquiring and questioning our democratic practice itself, I always have said that many times, in many occasions, we seem to have a lack of clarity, in terms of the concept itself. But also you underlined on the importance of these expressive freedoms, they are very valuable, expression, assembly, petition. I always say that electoral democracy is not a true test of democracy. For me, these are the more that give vitality to life, to democracy. The petition, the expression, because majoritarian, concepts are only very narrow. So thank you so much. Also sharing your ECOWAS litigation. I'm sure there will be questions on your presentation as well, but we'll come back to that. So